Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the forum. My name is Malcolm Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral. It is such a blessing to see all of you here. It's Fleet Week, and we keep hearing the jets fly over all week, and those are such extraordinary machines, such extraordinary power, and it's just a reminder just what human beings are capable of doing when we work together on projects to make something so extraordinary. This morning we're asking the question, what is venture capitalism? Why does it matter? And why does it matter who the venture capitalists are? We in the Bay Area are in the epicenter of innovative technology, and technology is changing our lives. Through the startups that venture capitalists discover, fund, and mentor, they play a critical role in shaping how people around the world work, play, communicate, study, travel, create, and interact. And they are shaping our future. And today, over 90% of investing partners at venture capital firms are men, and less than 2% of venture dollars go to startups founded by women. Our guest today has been a venture capitalist for over 30 years and was named one of the top most powerful people in global finance. He must be the first person I met who's one of the top most powerful people in global finance. She's the founder of Project Glimmer, which works to inspire at-risk teenage girls and women, and Broadway Angels, a network of top female venture capitalists and entrepreneurs. She invests in people and companies that matter. She is also one of the 4 subjects featured in this book by the journalist Julian Guthrie, Alpha Girls, the women upstarts who took on Silicon Valley's male culture and made the deals of a lifetime. Please join me in welcoming Sonja Perkins.
Thank you.
I was just saying that I enjoyed reading this so much. I would read it late at night, and then I would have kind of venture capitalist dreams.
I don't know what to say about that.
I know.
Yeah.
I don't even really know what to say about that, too. I'd wake up and I'd just be thinking about topics that I just don't usually explore.
Yeah.
But part of it is I think so much when I saw your daughter this morning. I was thinking so much about like what you were like as a kid, and I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about like who your teachers were or your mentors. I mean, if we were to see you when you were 11 or middle school, what part of you would we recognize as still being the you we know now?
That's interesting. That's a good question. I had 2 sisters. One was a twin and one was older, and they both got a lot of attention in different ways. So I kind of was under the radar. I kind of stayed out of everyone's way. I was pretty motivated. I got my homework done. I tried to do it early, which drove my sisters insane. But I think I was just an average kid. And that's what I think what's so special about the story is, a lot of people think that you have to be really special and really smart and have an engineering degree and have years of experience as a CEO to be a venture capitalist. But really all you have to be is hardworking and passionate about your job. And so, one of the reasons why I agreed to do this book is I just wanted to show the world that an average person could become a venture capitalist. It's actually not that hard.
One of the things I got from reading the book and just my experience with you too is that, there are different kinds of skills, and I feel like you have a kind of emotional intelligence that is part of your story and part of your success too. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, because there are obviously people who can manipulate spreadsheets or understand columns of numbers, and you may be great at those things too. But it seems like recognizing how to encourage people, recognizing what people want in a room, that seems very important too.
Yeah, I think being able to read people and read situations is really key to being a venture capitalist. Just being kind. I think that really helps, and I measure kind of my report card is how many entrepreneurs have I invested in more than once.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say about a third of my current portfolio are with entrepreneurs that I've invested in the past, and that's kind of my report card. But a lot of people think as a venture capitalist, you're right, you have to know all this technology and know, operations back and forth, but actually all you have to do to be good as a venture capitalist is win the deal, right? It's basically a sales job.
Right.
And I'm very good at that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the other thing I think about it that distinguishes it is, being a participant in the kind of the creation of this company too. It's not like you just write a check and then you're like, I'll see you next year.
Right.
So that is a really different element to it too.
Yeah, so as a venture capitalist and early stage companies, you go on the boards. And so I've been on the boards of probably 50 companies. I haven't counted them all, but a lot. And the interesting thing about startups is they all have great vision. They all supposedly have really big markets, great teams, but they're also always behind plan. So every single board meeting for every single startup that I have ever been involved, they've missed the number every single time, right? Wow. Which is kind of insane because, these companies are not profitable, so they need cash. And so if you miss the number every time, what do you do, right? And you can't get upset every single time because then you're not building a company. And so you have to ask questions like, is this a market problem? Is the market not there? Is this an implementation problem? Does this mean the management company just can't do what they're doing? Or is it a product problem? Does the product work or not? So if it's a product problem or an implementation problem, you can always fix that. You can always get a new person to help or, replace somebody or add somebody to the team. If the product doesn't work, you can always fix it.
But if it's a problem.
Right, but if it's a market problem, you can never fix it, right? And so you have to know when to get upset and when not to.
Yeah, what did you learn? And I mean, it's funny because I think of just having been in the same boards over and over again. I was on the vestry for my former church more than anyone in the history of the church because I went to every meeting for all those years. Right. And there's something I learned from going to those meetings. What did you learn from being on the board of all these different companies and organizations?
Well, the one thing I learned, and I think there's of course a lot of things that you learn, but as a venture capitalist, I find that the best way to be on the board is to be on the same team as the management team. And I think our industry is very different. It's a lot of us versus them, especially now with how venture capital has become kind of a huge category of asset management. But if you think, I'm the money and you work for me, it's kind of a really bad environment. And so if you have a problem, which companies always do, and you say, hey, we're in this together, let's fix it together, you have a much greater chance of solving the problem. Right. And I actually have been on several boards where at the very end, where it's a market problem, it's probably a management problem, and it's also probably a product problem, like everything went wrong, and you need to sell the company. And there's this thing called a management carve-out where you maybe save maybe $1 to $3 million of the sale of the company, and you give it to the management team because their stock's going to be worth zero because of preferred stock. And I get into these really big debates with some board members, and they say, well, if we don't make any money on this deal, then nobody's going to make any money on this deal. And I have done this more than once where I point out to the board, we are no longer making a financial decision in doing this. We are going to lose our money. Whether it's all of it or 99% of it, we're going to lose money, right? The decision we're making are a moral decision. Do we want to save the jobs for the people that work in this company, right? Do we want to save the customers for the people who trusted us to take whatever our little goofy product was to install it? And so, I always fight for these pretty much, large management carve-outs because I want to save the jobs and I want to save the customers. It's no longer a financial decision.
Yeah, there must be so many ethical questions at every level of the work that you do. I mean, it's almost like you can...
Hopefully not too many.
Well, I mean, there are in church life. Yeah. I mean, that's the way it is, Yeah. You and I lived across the waters from each other in the early 1990s when you were at Harvard Business School.
Right.
I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what it was like there, like what surprised you about it, and then what is business school for people who didn't go?
Right. Okay. So I went to a very large public high school in Charlottesville, Virginia, where during student activity period, which was 15 minutes, I stood next to my locker with my twin sister, terrified. I hated high school. I was just absolutely terrified. So then I went to the University of Virginia, and I was like, wow, nerds of the world unite. I was so excited to be at a place where people really cared about learning. And then by the time I got to Harvard Business School, I couldn't even believe it. Uber nerds. And it was just a very comfortable place for me.
Very comfortable place for you. I love that. I'm going to write that. They should put that on their marketing materials.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. So I loved it. And I decided I wanted to meet people. There's really interesting people there, and we all had in common that we wanted to be business people. And they're some of the most delightful people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And it was really hard, I have to say. Harvard Business School is really hard. By design, they're trying to make you think that you fail. So literally, like 90% of the class thought they were failing in the first semester because they don't give grades on purpose. But it really helped me kind of make decisions really quickly and just kind of helped me tremendously in learning how to write because it's all the case method and you had to like organize your ideas. It also taught me how to make decisions without not a lot of information, right? Because you didn't have enough time to really get 100% of the details on the cases, but you had to have a really strong opinion. And I think that's really helpful for venture capital because we never have enough information about anything that we invest in, right? And you just have to be able to kind of make a decision and go with it. And so,
were there any teachers or fellow students that stood out in terms of just like your recollections of the whole thing?
Oh yeah, so I was in section G, and I sat next to Paul Blavin on one side and Stacey Estrella on the other side. And Stacey has this amazing company called Humanifesto Studios, where she's this brilliant storyteller, and she actually works with Project Glimmer and one of my companies, 128, in terms of telling their story. And then on the other side was Paul Blavin, who he must have made a lot of money in finance. And he has devoted his entire life to helping foster kids get through college. Wow. And kind of similar, we have a lot in common with Project Glimmer and the Blavin Fellows. And he's one of my dearest friends. And I think the two of them, by virtue of having to sit next to each other every single day for a whole year, we became really close, and I probably wouldn't even have been friends with them if we hadn't sat next to each other, and now we're like family.
Yeah, I love the fact that you chose two people, too, who've done such good things, too, in their lives.
We're very special.
How did you first become aware of venture capitalism as being a venture capitalist? Like, how did you become aware of what it was, and then how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, it's kind of a crazy story. So I took an entrepreneurship class at the University of Virginia. This professor, Neil Snyder, was my professor, and he was really into entrepreneurship, which was not taught very often in college. I went to the business program, the Commerce School at UVA. And then after I went to UVA, where my father was a professor, I actually went to Europe for 6 months. Because I told my parents it was very Jeffersonian that I should study more than just, like business. And that was kind of crazy. And all the career people thought I was absolutely nuts because I was going to kill my chances of getting a job, which, by the way, I didn't get a job anyway after college, so it was something to do. And so I came back and I reached out to Neil Snyder and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. I'm going to live in Boston. And he said, oh, I know this guy, TA Associates, Richard Tadler. Why don't you, Richard just asked me if anybody I knew would want a job at TA Associates. And so that's how I got the job. And I was really lucky because my friend David Cardenas, who I was sleeping on his couch when I moved to Boston, had gotten an interview with TA and actually got a job offer with TA, but he turned it down to work at Bain & Company, and he had the brochure. So this was like before the internet. And so I had no idea what TA did, but I had the brochure the night before, and so I read that, and they thought I was a genius. I was like, I didn't tell them that David Cardenas had let me borrow it, but anyway, so that's how I got the job. And it was a really low risk for them to hire me because I was just out of college. I was an entry-level employee. My job was to cold call software companies, and software was just becoming a category of investment because historically people believe that when your engineers went home, the value went home. And so if your engineer got hit by a bus or whatever, then the product was worth nothing. When the reality of software is that you write it one time and it costs nothing to reproduce and very little to sell. So it has an incredible business model. It's almost like 100% gross margins. And so it was actually a very, very good business. And so my job was to cold call just about every single PC software company in the US, which I actually did. And they paid me to do that. And then I found deals, and I actually found 3 companies, including McAfee, that all went public. So I had really good beginner's luck. And I made $28,000 a year.
Yeah, that's what I made too back then.
Yeah.
35.
Yeah. Oh, you're a guy, right? So.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was that like too? Just like, what was TA Associates, and just like what was it like being a woman in kind of those settings where there are so many men?
Well, it's funny. People always ask me that, and I got to TA, and I was really 100% convinced that I had the best job that any graduate from the University of Virginia had ever had. Like, I got to talk on the phone all day, and entrepreneurs are so passionate, and you got to hear what they were up to. It was so interesting. And then about 3 weeks into it, and I'm not sure why it took me this long, I realized I was the only woman in the Boston office. And I was like, oh my God, they've hired me because I'm a woman. And oh no, this must be some kind of quota. And I felt like I was like on a tall ledge kind of looking down, and I was terrified. And so I wandered around for like 3 days, really depressed that they had lowered their standards to hire me. And then I was like, what am I doing? And I love the movie Moonstruck, and when Cher smacks Nicolas Cage after he says he loves her, and she tells him to just snap out of it. And so I literally just told myself to snap out of it, and that was it. And I was like, I belong here. This is, I'm not going to question myself, because, we as people, and women especially, we tend to question everything, and it just wastes so many cycles. And so I decided I just wasn't even going to consider that as a problem anymore, and then it wasn't magically.
So when was the first time you worked with somebody kind of who was a woman and who was kind of at your level in whatever setting you were in?
Well, there was a woman that worked at TA Associates. Her name was Jackie Morby, but she was based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Her husband worked for Mellon Bank, and Jackie had this incredible story because she got married, had her kids, and then she decided to go to the Simmons Business School.
Oh, yeah.
And she wanted to get like a degree, so she got an MBA from the Simmons Business School. And her husband was friends with Kevin Landry, who was this legendary founder. Well, actually, he wasn't the founder, but legendary managing director of TA. And so her husband asked a favor to Kevin, do you mind if Jackie is an internship? And he's like, yeah, but we're not going to pay her. And so she became, she worked for TA, and it turns out she was so good at the job, she's the one who figured out the software industry, so she became a partner. But it's kind of an embarrassing way to start your career, is like getting to work for free,
Yeah, right.
So,
right,
but she did work there, and she was great, and I never did. Well, I maybe did a couple deals with her, but one thing I learned from Jackie, which even my partners at Menlo thought I was insane, but even if a company wasn't raising money, go visit them anyway, right? Because you want to find the best companies.
Right.
So we would go to Iowa, and there was this guy named Bob Parsons, and his company was Parsons Technology. And it was basically like little PC software things that like the Bible and all kinds of stuff that he was selling using direct marketing. And so we were at the country club with Bob and Martha Parsons trying to convince them to raise some money, which they ended up selling to Intuit. And you probably have seen Bob Parsons now because he's the founder of GoDaddy. And you see those ads, yeah. But so I think he ended up raising money later. But anyway, we would do that, and we would just constantly travel, and we'd say, hey, we're going to be in Decorah. We'd love to come say hi. Just happen to be in the neighborhood, right? Yeah. And oftentimes it worked really well.
Yeah, and there was enough things that were changing that then you're kind of at the forefront of changing. You have a sense for, like you said, that like the margins on software, like who predicted that in like 1965? But now it's something that's so obvious to us, and you're kind of the forefront of that recognition that people have.
Yeah, it's fun.
You wrote like a girl's guide to winning.
Girl's Guide to Winning.
Yeah. I wonder if you can tell us some of what you put in the Girl's Guide, and then also like if you've changed your mind about any of it, that any of the things that you put in.
Yeah. So I probably put that together. Tess, what do you think? When did I put that together? You don't know. I know I gave it to your third grade class, so it was before that. So probably about 7 years ago, somebody asked me to give a talk, and I really believe that girls and women can be really powerful, but I think sometimes we get in our own way. So I decided to put together this presentation, which I think I gave to some college kids in New York first, and I just called it The Girl's Guide to Winning, and I basically just had a couple of basic phrases with examples. in this presentation, and to just show that you can do it. And the first one is just have a passion for what you do, right? And there's lots of people like Taylor Swift. She was so passionate about being a country singer that she convinced her parents to move from Pennsylvania to Nashville when she was 14, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you really have to be passionate, and you need that passion to get there. The other one was, do work that men do, right? Don't just assume that you can't do it. And I have a picture of Amelia Earhart where she was obviously doing work that men did. I have some have your unique style, but follow the rules of the game, and that's Coco Chanel. And I always talk about how people, like women, should dress like Coco Chanel wearing Banana Republic, because you get viewed by how you appear, even though if it's fair or not, it doesn't matter. That's just the rules of the game. I talk about bringing something unique to the table, right? So Marissa Mayer, who was at Google, she actually did her thesis at Stanford on mapping, right? So when she joined Google, she was running all of Google Maps. And so it wasn't she was just one of the first 30 people to be hired at Google. It's because she knew about mapping, right? So you have to bring something unique to the table to get a job. I love the story about never giving up. You can't give up, ever. If you really are passionate about something, you really cannot give up. And you think of the story about J.K. Rowling, right? So she wrote Harry Potter, and she was working for Amnesty International. She was living closely out of her car. I don't know if it was really out of her car. But she had written Harry Potter, and everybody thought all the publishers didn't really like it. She went to 13 publishers, and finally one of them said, well, I'll just have my 8-year-old read it. And it turns out the 8-year-old loved it, and that's history, right? And by the time she's 42, she's like a billionaire, right? And so, and then owning your story, and I talk about Malala, because she owns her story. She got shot in the face, but she's still saying girls should be educated, right?
Right.
And networking and making friends. I had a picture of Katharine Graham sitting at the table at the Washington Post with the 40 other board members or something. And so there's plenty of stories of women who have really had a fundamental belief or something. And, I guess, I had a picture of Hillary, never give up. That was kind of sad. Yeah. And then... and then, I had a picture of Sheryl Sandberg. I would probably change it now, given the controversy around Facebook. But you can change the rules when you win, but you have to win first, right? It's really hard to change the rules from the outside or from the bottom.
Right.
So those are just a few of my girls' guides to winning.
It's so interesting too, because the rules. It's just so.
Yeah.
There's so many times the rules are so unspoken or so deep or subconscious that it's almost like we don't even we're not completely aware of them. And it is good to be just reminded that there are those rules, even if some of them are dehumanizing or limiting or what have you. And I like that part of just there's an area of improvisation, and there's an area of just following the procedures.
Right.
So when you first came out to California, what did you think, and what was like? I mean, Rebecca in her notes said that you came out the headline for Time magazine was "The Internet is here" or something like that. What was that like? First arriving here, and what were some of the struggles of just trying to make your way in Silicon Valley?
Well, actually, my grandparents lived here, so they had just died right before my grandmother just died. So I used to come out here for Thanksgiving. Every year we go to Pajaro Dunes, and I was always surprised that people would wear sandals and sweaters at the same time.
That's great.
I was like, wow, it's cold. Why are you wearing sandals? But when I came out here for work in 1994, I thought it was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I think that my career has been so blessed because when I started in venture capital, the PC was just becoming a business tool. And then when I came out to California, the internet was just becoming a thing. And believe it or not, even in 1994, there were people that thought it was a fad. Which is
it's so funny.
I know. And
I had the first church website in 1995 in the diocese.
Yeah. And so I didn't think it was a fad at all.
Not at all.
And so I've been able to ride some waves and make some really good investments. So one of the things I like to do in a new industry is I never can really figure out like who's going to win, right? Like, was it going to be, this web company or this consumer site or whatever? But I can figure out what everyone's going to need to buy, right? So everybody's needing to buy load balancers, and everybody's going to want to have email and things like that. And so I was able to do some really important companies that were core infrastructure. So even like with at TA with McAfee Associates, I knew that everybody wanted to buy antivirus software, right?
Right.
With internet, everybody needed a load balancer, right? So, and so that's kind of what I tend to do, is focus on core infrastructure companies that everybody, the winners and the losers, will buy, and it'll make a big
I
company.
love that way of looking at it. I wonder, I've been thinking about this so much this week. Those technologies have changed everything. I mean, like the number of journalists who lost their jobs because of, in every field. I mean, it's like, so when people talk about the church having to kind of adjust to the new realities and how hard the change is, I just think of other fields where it's even more pronounced and more dramatic, how, disruption has affected people's jobs and people's lives and people's culture, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I wonder how those changing technologies have just affected the life of kind of like day-to-day finance things. Like, because there's both you investing in the companies, and but there's also just how it's changed, like how you value companies, how you understand the world, et cetera. And I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
Well,
technological disruption.
Yeah, I don't think venture capital has been technologically disrupted, although it has become an investment category, which I think has attracted a different kind of person. I think the kind of person that used to want to be an investment banker now wants to be a venture capitalist, which I think is very different. When I was at TA, the kind of people that wanted to be venture capitalists were the kind of people that wanted to change the world, that wanted to make the world a better place and make business more productive. And so I think now with companies like Jewel that gets funded, people are pretty much just investing for profits. Maybe not everybody, but more than makes me comfortable. And so I think we as an industry need to reevaluate that, because venture capital today has much more power than it ever has, and mainly because of the iPhone. And every man, woman, and child in the world has access or has an iPhone, or almost. And everything that goes on that really affects our core world. And when you think about democracy, when you think about health, when you think about AI, when you think about all kinds of things, like we're actually touching everyone's lives. And so I think we have a much bigger responsibility than we ever have. And I, originally investing, and I actually still am most comfortable investing in very hard technology that makes businesses run better, right? And so that's just, I can do that all day long, right?
Yeah.
But I'm never gonna invest in a company that addicts children to games. I'm never gonna invest in things that I think will hurt people, and I don't think that our industry is consciously thinking about that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we should.
that's a fascinating thing, because it is such a change in culture. And I think of like men like Bill Bowes and kind of just kind of what kind of people those people were.
Right.
And you're right. It's everything's accelerated, and technology is part of that story for sure.
Right.
What are some of the companies or endeavors that you've invested in that you're just like most proud of, that kind of really did make our lives different or better?
Sure. I mean, a past one is McAfee Associates, right?
Yeah,
Just kind of protecting computers from viruses. But a current one today is a company called 128 Technology, and it's a company that I've funded the founders 3 times now. So
Wow,
that's a very good report card on their board. And it's in Boston, and the company is basically changing routing, right? So the way the internet sends data, and routing is based on a protocol called IP. It was written 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, and it was designed to basically enable networks to run if one part of the network went
If
down.
one node was
So it's a
nuked,
self-healing network, right? But they didn't think at all about security. They didn't even think about efficiency. They didn't think about a lot of things. And so when the internet actually became used by all of us, we're using it in very different ways than it was actually intended. And so it's not secure. There's identity is not a safe way to determine if you can access data, because credentials get stolen. It's not efficient. People have tunnels. They have firewalls, they have load balancers, they have all this kind of stuff that they put on top of their routers. And so what 128 is doing is they're basically saying, you know what, we're going to put all that functionality into routing, and we're going to make the internet safe. It's not going to be the number one risk that America has and the world has at cyber terrorism, right? And so anyway, so they have a lot of customers. They're growing rapidly, and I think that company is going to really make the world safer and better. And so that's one I'm very proud of.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear all this. Yeah, exactly. Because there's so much
Right.
changing that we need to consider. I was wondering, you've probably thought a lot about just kind of like the role of women in these places. I wonder just like how we're doing in terms of having people of color being involved in decisions in companies like this.
Yeah, so
I'm
it's.
going to fix your microphone first.
Oh, no,
though.
that's right. Okay.
Yeah, here you go.
All right, I got it.
Your hair is.
That's all right.
There we go.
All right, I got it? Okay.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So we do not have enough women, and we do not have enough people of color in venture capital at all. The real unicorn is the woman of color. And in Alpha Girls, Kim Davis King is mentioned. Kim and I did F5 together. F5 is a public company. I think it's worth about $10 billion right now. I don't know, I haven't checked recently. It's a load balance company, and Kim showed it to me. And she was with a smaller fund, and I was with a larger fund. And so I kind of rounded out, or kind of led the round, and Kim participated. And it turned out to be a phenomenal investment. So as we were both in our early 30s, we were both on the board of F5. Not one person thought to take a picture, which was kind of insane.
Oh my gosh,
right?
that's wild, yeah.
Kim, and there's a
Right.
board of 5 and 2 women on the board, and 1 woman of color. So afterwards, after this incredible, it was such a fun company. I mean, oh my gosh, we were just trying to figure out what to do with all the profits. We're like, oh, maybe we give bonuses. I mean, it was such
Right.
it was
Oh,
such a
that's
good
lovely.
business model. I know, those are great. Anyway, so I took her to Hawaii. We went to the Four Seasons, the Hawaiiai in Hawaii, and it just opened. And I thought, oh, this will be great, and I'm going to thank her for this great deal. And we went after going to the pool to the gift shop, the jewelry store they had there. And the woman working there asked us if we worked for the hotel. And we were kind of horrified by that, right? Yeah. And like, what, why would we be there, right, at this fancy hotel? So, there definitely is bias. But Kim is an amazing investor. And, we're part of this group called Broadway Angels,
Right, exactly.
which is a group of top women venture capitalists measured by performance and women entrepreneurs. And we invest in deals together. It's just like a club. It's not a fund, but we share deals and due diligence. And we have this incredible network where we all have our own networks where we see things from healthcare to new retail to core infrastructure companies and things like that. And we've just made some great investments. And we have 2 women of color, and actually 3 women of color now in Broadway Angels, which is, still not enough out of the 52 members, but there's just not enough.
How did you decide to start Broadway? Because how did you decide to start it, and how did you decide what the rules would be? Because I don't know if you're modeling on something else or if it's just something that you just invented.
Yeah. So Broadway Angels was started because I was kind of sick and tired of people telling me there weren't any women in the venture industry, because there were women in the venture industry. There was 1 in every 4th firm. So at the time, there was 1 woman in 25% of the firms, which is small. So that meant 75% of the firms never had a woman, right? Still the same.
And that you could all know each other so easily.
Yeah, but we were all kind of siloed, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if we just kind of got together and shared deals and due diligence? And it really wasn't modeled after anything, and I was actually kind of nervous. I wasn't sure if anybody would want to be part of it, and because you basically, I kind of said, hey, I'm a woman. Look, I'm a woman. And Magdalena Yassel, who's the co-founder of Broadway Angels, she actually wrote an op-ed piece, or maybe it was Kate Mitchell, about coming out as a woman. Like, I am a woman,
I'm a woman,
right?
Believe it or not.
Don't tell anybody, but I am a woman. And, MJ Elmore, who's mentioned in Alpha Girls, she talks about the third sex. Well, there's men, and then there's women, and then there's women who are venture capitalists, or, and she said it was so awkward dressing for like social events, like a strapless dress or something, right? Because guys were like, wow, I didn't realize you're a woman. So anyway, so starting Broadway Angels, it turned out to be great because we're now over 50 members, and we actually have a voice where people come to Broadway Angels and the press and others, they ask us what we think about things. And there was this one professor at Harvard Business School who took some data from a data source that didn't actually have return numbers in it and was going to publish a report about how women are worse investors than men. But he had a very flawed analysis. And so, we got a hold of this early, and we wrote a letter to the dean of the business school and to him and, various people, and we stopped it because it was wrong. And we actually got Cambridge Associates involved in a side level, and they actually ran the numbers. It turns out that men and women are just about equal depending on years. Some years women are better, some years men are better. So we had a voice like that. We couldn't have stopped that as individuals. Like, he would have published it anyway, and then he didn't. Because,
it's fascinating because you didn't form it to have this advocacy role, but that's what the world gave you.
Yeah. But we're trying to make really good investments, and there's some investments that women see that our male counterparts don't see, and a great example of that is a company called The Real Real. I'm sure you guys are familiar with The Real Real. It was founded by a woman CEO, Julie Wainwright, and she basically every round was led by a woman VC. And what The Real Real does is it takes high-end luxury goods and it resells them online. And so people who spend a lot of money for their blouse or whatever can recoup some of the costs when they don't wear it anymore. And then people who couldn't normally afford those kinds of items or don't really want to pay all that money all the time can buy it. And so I think they did over $1 billion in sales last year. It's a public company. I went to the IPO, which was very high on the fun factor. It was really, really fun. And I learned at the IPO that Julie Wainwright had only received one term sheet for every round, which meant that if she hadn't gotten that one term sheet from that one woman investor, the company would not have succeeded. Wow. And I think about like how many Real Reals are out there that didn't get funding, right? And a lot of women-founded companies, they can only raise like $2 million, which isn't enough to really determine if your idea is a good one or not. And sometimes it takes $10 million to realize it's not a good idea, and then you go home, but at least you knew it wasn't a good idea, right? But if you only can raise $2 million, maybe it was a phenomenal idea, but you just couldn't raise the money to prove out the market. And that's the thing that kind of makes me sad, because I think there's a lot of really great companies that need to be funded, that need to be out there, that will focus on different, better markets.
Right, and exactly right. That's amazing to think of all this lost, that could have enriched our lives and could have.
Yeah. Thank God The Real Real made it.
I know.
I'm a big customer.
Exactly. And I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah. Well, now you do.
Now I do. Exactly. Yeah. It's good.
They do men's clothes too.
Oh, I'm glad. It's clearly in need of them. Do they have clergy shirts?
Yeah, I don't think they. I don't know.
Clergy shirts are too baggy.
Maybe I'm not sure.
I've been thinking about this part. In the book, which I enjoyed reading very much, there are definitely tensions between women, just like the spouses just not being understanding or being supportive and helpful. And I wonder if you have anything to say to help spouses, to be more supportive for women who are in these kinds of leadership. Well,
the lucky thing for me is I have the best spouse ever, who's right there, John Perkins. That's the one thing I didn't have. That was not, one embarrassing thing I didn't have in the book. I have a great spouse and a great marriage and a great daughter who's not paying attention.
So what makes it great?
Well, I think, one is we just chose well, right?
Yeah.
But then I think two is we figure out like who does what in the marriage. Like I write the thank you notes and buy the Christmas presents and do the Christmas cards, and John makes sure that the test gets picked up from school every day. Yeah. That that the food is there. So
Right.
we have he takes out the trash. Thank you very much for that. But we just kind of have our roles, like, in terms of who plans the vacations and things. And then we actually sometimes even have partners meetings where we get together and we're like, okay, this is the month. This is what we have to do.
Yeah.
This is like, we actually sit down and talk about what needs to happen. And it's kind of boring, and we probably don't like some of that much, but
I like that, of having partners
yeah, we
meeting
have
for the
partners
household,
meeting,
because you
right.
do have all these things
Yeah.
that are coming
And like,
up.
I think it's very natural for me because, we have partners meetings every Monday in the venture industry.
Right.
And so it's like, well, let's have a partners meeting. And we actually do them on Mondays because it's like my normal day.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh, that's neat. We have a tradition at Grace Cathedral where we write down questions on the note cards, and Rebecca collects those questions, questions that we might have for our guests. I have been thinking just about how people perceive and understand money.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a difference between the way men perceive money and women perceive money. Is there anything that we just like receive from kind of our cultural inheritance that changes how we experience?
So I always love those questions when people ask me, what's it like, being a twin, or or
Yeah,
I'm a
that's
twin.
a good question
Or
too.
what's it like between men and women? I don't know. I'm not a man.
Yeah.
But I think women tend to not be perceived as highly when they value money, and I've been told people should talk about money. It shouldn't be taboo.
Right.
I actually really like money because I like what it can do for me and others. And so, I founded this nonprofit called Project Glimmer, where we inspire at-risk teenage girls and women to believe in themselves by letting them know their community cares. And I'm a donor to Project Glimmer, and we are helping foster girls with in-person mentorship programs. We're doing all kinds of things. We can send people to college with money. I mean, there's a lot of really good things you can do with it, so.
Yeah, our old bishop
Yeah.
used to say,
Yeah.
money is ministry because of what you can do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and sometimes you're right. We do have a lot of hang-ups about money. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus, like in the Gospel of Luke, like 1 out of every 7 of the things he says is about money.
Right.
And yet we probably don't talk about money as much in church as Jesus talked about to his friends.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Here's a good question. Leaping from business to politics, might you offer some advice to my solemn venture of persistence as a humble foot soldier in the resistance for the survival of our democratic republic? So, I guess the
Right.
question's about how's politics affecting the venture world in these last few years?
Well, I mean, the venture industry, I mean, it's about capital gains, right? And so the taxes, they tend to be more focused on not paying taxes. But I think politics really needs to change. I mean, I don't really can't really speak for the venture capital industry, but I can speak for women, right?
Right.
So, we still don't have that many women representing us, and major decisions about our bodies and our health care and, all these things are happening. And I think, women need to be united in finding leaders that represent all of us.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I am very discouraged about politics right now. And I used to always wonder, like, what is it that we as women have that unites us? And like, how can we become a voting bloc? Because we should have more power than we do. I think it might be the Me Too movement that kind of unites us, that we don't want to be assaulted. But we do need to be more powerful, and we need to vote and use our voices, because I think our country is in desperate need of
I mean, at your point
leadership.
too, I just think of
Yeah.
If 2% of women's companies receive funding
Yeah.
from venture capitalists, then 98% out there, like what wonderful things are we missing because
Right.
because women are not adequately represented?
Yeah. And with that too, like when you think about artificial intelligence and health right now, like the models are all men. And so if all these AI models are being developed using the male models, that means our healthcare is going to be terrible for women, right? We're going to get the wrong percentages of the drugs. We're not going to have the cancer treatments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem.
How do you think the VC world should participate in advancing social justice issues, if at all?
Oh, I think the VC world should definitely participate in advancing causes of social justice and basically asking the question, is this a profitable company and does this move society forward, right? So things that move society backwards shouldn't get funded. Jewel should not be funded. I mean, those kinds of companies just shouldn't be funded. And I think we need to ask that. And when you think about climate change right now, right? I mean, that's a really big topic. And we shouldn't be just focused on profits, right? I mean, it's clearly hurting all of us. And so, we really need to be leaders in that. And so I only invest in people and companies that matter. I ask that question every time I make an investment because I do not want to be part of the demise of our society.
Exactly. And the stakes are high right now.
Yeah, very high.
How has your faith and spirituality impacted the way you do your work?
Well, I think it's important to always have compassion when you are in a business environment. And I actually am a meditator. I meditate. My happy place is a temple in Bhutan, right? And it's important because if you can be compassionate about like replacing a CEO or not putting the next dollar in the company because it's not going to make sense, you can still everyone can still feel good about it, right? If you're doing it for the right reasons, and it's often when you need to replace a CEO, it's because everyone's jobs are reliant on the importance of that CEO, and every customer is reliant on their ability to execute. And so, sure, maybe that one CEO has to go, and that's maybe not so pleasant for him or her, but it's the benefit for the company is better.
Right, seeing the big picture. Malcolm Gladwell says that outsiders, minorities, women's, Canadians, can see things people on the inside can't see. Can you give an example from your investment life where, as an outsider, you had a different point of view?
I love Malcolm Gladwell, by the way.
Yeah, me too. He's one of the best Malcolms out there.
He does good justice for Malcolms. I think just in hiring, it can be very, very helpful. I had one situation where we had a founding CEO of a company that was not performing, like the company wasn't performing. But we had a really good market, we had a really good product, we had tons of customers, but for some reason, like the management team was just fighting. And we needed a new, and our sales needed some fixing. And we needed a new CEO. And there was, and the CEO of the company agreed that he needed some help. And so we had two candidates, and we had one that was kind of the touchy-feely candidate, was really good at HR and organizational behavior, and it was going to be really great culture builder for the company. And then we had this other candidate who was kind of a scrappy sales and marketing CEO, and he knew how to sell. And most of the board wanted this touchy-feely CEO because the culture, whatever. And I wanted the sales CEO, who didn't really look much like a CEO compared to this touchy-feely one. And basically, there was a lot of disagreement, and we weren't able to choose anyone for the longest time. And then finally, I said, okay, we have two companies. We have the 6-month company and the 6-year company. Your CEO candidate, touchy-feely, would be great for the next 6 years. This is the perfect candidate. But unless we sell something in the next 6 months, we're going to close the company down.
All right.
And so we picked the sales and marketing CEO.
The scrappy one.
And then the company went public. Yeah. And then I've funded that guy 2 times since after that. And so anyway, so that was one where we kind of split the baby. And so everybody won. Like we picked the right CEO for the 6-year company, but we couldn't hire that person because we needed the 6-month CEO. And I think the funny story was there was a woman also on that board, I won't say her name, and she did not like me at all. She thought I was this whippersnapper, and she kind of like spit on me. It was so awkward going into the bathroom because two of us were there at the break, and usually I was by myself in the bathroom at breaks, but so anyway, so there we'd be in the bathroom, and she just did not like me. And I even had to agree that when we raised a new round of financing, I would get off the board, and it was my first board seat. And then after that situation happened, she actually offered me a full partnership at her firm.
Wow.
So I was like,
That's
okay, I
great.
didn't take it, but yeah.
What
that's pretty
advice
funny.
would you give to a female founder who wants to make an impact on business so there are more family-friendly practices? Example, a cap on hours working each day. France has a limit, allowing women to return to the workforce after maternity leave without losing leadership opportunities, et cetera. So a female founder who wants to make an impact through family-friendly practices.
Well, that's back to when you are at the top, you can make changes. So if you're a female founder and you're the CEO of the company, you get to make the maternity policies. You get to make all the policies. And a great example of a female founder who I think is phenomenal is this woman, Lynn Perkins. She's the founder of Urban Sitter, and they're the people, male and female, who work for Urban Sitter. They get to go to their kids' soccer games, and then they come back, right? And they have maternity leave. They get to take time off, and in doing so, she's created this incredible culture where people really like to work there. They don't feel like they're giving up on their families or their careers, and they actually, believe it or not, you will not believe this, are more productive.
Oh yeah, I
Yep.
can imagine that. How has being a woman been a particular asset as a VC?
Oh, well, I always answer that question. This is my stock answer. Everybody remembers me, right? I mean, it's like so easy, right? And like, I mean, it's kind of a little embarrassing because sometimes I don't remember everybody, but people remember you, and I think that's part of it. And because I'm so unique in the industry, it's really easy for me to get meetings, and people are friendly. I've never really had these like tough business negotiations because I smile and disarm them, and we get to it. So I think it's been helpful. But I've always been my authentic self. Like I'm a hugger, and things like that. Like I don't shake your hand too hard. It's not what I would do.
Yeah.
And, so I think it's important always to be your authentic self because people can capture that.
Yeah, that's great. The comment you made regarding VC's responsibilities and positive life-building investments really resonates with me. What would it take, and how could you influence a movement within the VC industry to acknowledge and own this responsibility?
Say that again.
The comment you made regarding VCs in positive life-building investments. So how could you create a movement among VCs to acknowledge and raise up this responsibility? It's kind of what you were saying. I mean, in a way, it's like Broadway Angels is a little bit of that.
Yeah, and there's this group called All Raise, which are trying to get more women in the industry.
And I think it's more like, how do you, I love what you said. Basically, you said one of the biggest changes in VC life is less of a focus on whether the companies are providing good things for the society.
Right. I mean,
how do you get that message out there?
I think the way you do that is the entrepreneurs do it, right? Because if you start losing deals, right? So like right now, with the women's issue, a lot of entrepreneurs say, I will not work with a firm that doesn't have a woman partner. Just not going to do it. And so now everyone's hurrying up and they're hiring their women partners just so they can not lose some deals, and that happens, right? Yeah. And I think there'll be entrepreneurs that say, I'm not going to take money from a fund that doesn't have these values, right? And I think that's how that happens.
Yeah, that's a very helpful answer. Yeah. Where and how do you think the vision and sentiment of your generation got lost over the years? Where are we now, and how do you feel positive?
How got lost.
I know.
Okay.
I think you might just be able to just talk about just how your generation, what our generation's perspective on things is. If you think that our generation,
I don't know. Am I in the young generation or the old generation?
You're in the middle one.
I'm in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, basically, to help you, we're kind of post-baby boomerish.
I guess so. Well, I mean, the venture industry was such a great industry that more people wanted to get in it. I mean, the ring the brass bell or whatever. But, I think the industry kind of goes up and down. It's not going to be as popular as it is now. And I think when that happens, it'll shake out people that are just there for profits and not there for changing society in positive ways. But that's a tough question. Like, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, there's still, I still think there's amazing people in the venture industry at all ages, right? I mean, it's a really passion business, right? You have to be very passionate about what you're doing. But But, as in all industries, you're going to get all kinds of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do people ever ask you about income and wealth inequality, just like taxation structures? When we were little children, there's a 90% income tax bracket.
Right.
And now, wealthy people are not taxed as heavily as they were in the early 70s. I don't know if you have a perspective or anything to share about that.
Well, I believe that societies don't work unless everybody participates.
Yeah.
I'm not a big believer in 90% income taxes. I'm just going to put that out there. But I believe that society has to work. And you look at our city of San Francisco and how it's kind of normal to step over someone on the sidewalk, right? And we don't even see that as a problem. And I think we really need to see it as a problem. And as a society, we need to fix it, right? We can't just rely on our government to do it. We have to fix it as a society. And because our city is not working, right? I mean, there are people that don't want to come here anymore. You walk down the street and there's whiffs of urine everywhere. I mean, it's gross. And that shouldn't be normal, right? I mean, and we're all seem to be desensitized to it, and we need to really make that happen. And I'm trying to do it with kids and trying to get girls to believe in themselves and provide positive feedback to them that they're worth it and they're valuable. And we do these mentorship programs and we give jewelry and makeup, and we're just trying to let these kids know that's just a small little drop in the bucket, right? But if we all did something,
Right.
we could make it happen.
I often think about that. I mean, because you have the government sector, the nonprofit sector, and the for-profit sector. Is there any rule of thumb or advice you have in terms of which sector does what? Do you mean that nonprofit can fund maybe certain size projects, but that's not enough for some things which need a government to do? I don't know if you think about those kinds of questions. Maybe that's not something that bothers.
No. I mean, I think we all have to do it together.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just have a job and you don't give back to society in some way that you can, you should probably think about what you should be doing, something. And if everybody did something, it would.
It's like right livelihood. That's what I love about so much of what you've talked about in our conversation today has been, in not funding those companies that are going to be bad for kids.
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing, is just to always be thinking, what does this policy mean for children?
Yeah.
Definitely. We have more questions, but
okay.
But I have to go up and preach a sermon.
Oh.
Yeah, which I'd much rather stay down here and talk to you. But I wonder if you can, we had Chip Conley on the forum like a couple of weeks ago, and he said, the whole retirement system was kind of set up for people to die when they were 67. Mm-hmm. And now that we maybe, a larger portion of us are going to live to be 100, what will that mean in terms of just like how we choose to live our life? And I wonder, just for you, what's next? I mean, is it just still doing the same things that you're doing now? Or, what does the future hold, do you think, for you?
That's a good question. About, it was probably 10 years ago, I had some life-changing things happen to me where, I got to evaluate what is important. And I decided that day that I was going to just spend my time doing things that I actually wanted to do, right? Yeah. And I wasn't going to give my time away and not spend time with people that, for favors and things like that. And so I kind of live my life every day to the fullest. I love spending time with my family. I love helping entrepreneurs. I love working with Project Glimmer. I think Project Glimmer is really expanding. We're expanding our boards to New York and Los Angeles. So I probably see a lot more philanthropy and a lot more giving back in the future, and probably, still always investing. I can't seem to help myself. And then working on my daughter Tess over there and making sure that she grows up to be a wonderful person who believes in herself and is confident and is just joyful. Yes.
It's been such a pleasure getting to know you both here and you know our tea together. And you know you wear it so lightly, but you really are a kind of hero out there. You're a pioneer, and you know you're always like, no, I'm not a pioneer, but you are. And
Thank you.
we're very grateful for the example that you set for us and for what you're doing for young women. I'm very grateful that you decided to be here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been
Yeah.
such an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you.
I want to tell everybody about who's coming next. Next week, we're going to be having Naomi Wolf. She's the best-selling author of The Beauty Myth, and she'll be talking about her latest book, Outrages, Sex, Censorship, and the Criminalization of Love. She'll also talk about the delay of its release in the U.S. and the controversy about that. The service will be at 11 o'clock right after this. You may want to make a gift to the forum, and we have that little box that you can make a gift to. And we're so grateful for you for being here today, Sonja. And I think she'll be back there to answer any more questions and to perhaps sign books if you're interested.
Yeah,
in,
thank you.
in
Thanks for
having
having
an
me.
Alpha Girls. Thank you very much,
right.
Sonja.